Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the ICAA webinar. Today, we are privileged to have a group of very knowledgeable individuals. We will wait exactly 60 seconds as we have activated the go button so that individuals will be able to join us, and then we will get started. So grab your Diet Coke, your cup of coffee, your glass of water, no wine yet, and get ready for our session to begin in exactly 40 seconds.
Can we have wine afterwards, Colin?
You know, it's back east. You will be past the noon time, so I think lunch and wine is fine. Oh, it's not a Friday, is it? Oh, sorry.
No.
That
Unfortunately.
applies here too. We're on Central. We can do it.
Yeah, Central Time will do it. Okay, and so what I'd like to do today, before we get rolling, is to introduce our presenters for today. Tony Galvin with V, but I will, certainly let Ryan say a lot more about Tony, because there is a lot more to say about Tony. Take that either way you would like. And Kelly Strandberg, and Kelly has been out there for a long time and has seen many changes in the industry. And one of those changes is certainly what we're going to be talking about today with personalization and gamification, and how it can have a significant impact on the industry. And then Ryan, let me pronounce your name and you can tell me if I am doing it correctly. Galia.
No, but that's what most people say. It's Gallia.
Galia.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go. First lesson of webinar introductions is to know how to pronounce the last name of the person that is going to be handling the webinar. So today we're going to be talking about unlocking the power of personalization and gamification, elevating engagement in wellness programs for older adults. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan, who is also the CEO of Icon, and we are thankful that they are sponsoring this session and that it will be a learning opportunity for all of you. So Ryan, take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you, Colin, for the colorful introduction to kick things off. Really excited to be here today, and thanks for having me. I think this is a really exciting topic, and I think something we'll probably be hearing a lot more about in the coming years. And so it's great to kind of potentially be the first time you're hearing about this. But if not, I think some of the insights here, even for those who are more familiar with it, should be great and very beneficial. As Colin said, I'm the CEO of Icon. We are a communications, engagement, and experience software for employees, residents, and family members for specifically senior living. Let me pass it quickly to Kelly to go brief on her background.
My name is Kelly Strandberg. I am an account executive with Full Count. Full Count is a point of sale system designed specifically for the senior living industry. I am new to that team, and I've spent the last 15 years working with operators on everything lifestyle that's resident facing and employee facing.
Awesome.
Tony's turn.
Hey everybody, Tony Galvan with V Living. I oversee our resident engagement strategies with V. I've been there for a few years and been in the space coming up on a couple of decades now, and have worked with various owners and operators within our space, and always along that sort of lifestyle and resident engagement aspect.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And with that, yeah, let's kick things off. We're going to structure this more like a discussion, and hopefully glean some takeaways. But to kind of shape that discussion, there's kind of 7 key questions we hope to answer for you today. With the first one being obviously what exactly is gamification, and trying to demystify that for everybody. To really giving you all the insights to assess whether gamification is for you, where to start even, and some real world examples of how this has been done well in practice. And we're going to leave a little bit of time at the end for questions. Feel free though to drop them in the chat and we'll pick them up at the end. So with that, what exactly is gamification? I mean, this is a great quote that doesn't say what it is, but I think it shows you the potential. Gamification is really the next stage in engagement. I think a lot of engagement that's been done up till now has been what I would deem more passive in nature, and gamification really adds that next level of interactivity, to really use fun to drive well-being and wellness. At a high level, just before I kind of open it to the panel, gamification is really just any sort of usage of game design elements to basically enhance a otherwise more repetitive experience. So think, to be honest, it's anything from like, if you don't like to work out and you prefer to play a sport, that's in essence gamification. You're getting the physical benefits of the sports and you're having fun doing it. And that's really in a nutshell what it is. The goal really here is to make things more fun, to drive engagement, get people engaged who might not otherwise be interested in just doing physical activity or well-being, mental health. It really applies in any setting. Learning, even dieting, it can really be very, very broadly applicable. And there's no shortage of applications and benefits, I think, to our environment in senior living. So with that, maybe I'll point first to Tony. Kind of, what are some of the benefits you've seen to gamification, and kind of how have you defined it?
Yeah, I think that definition is right, Ryan, and I think it's sort of telling that you have people like myself and Kelly on this webinar in particular, just with our backgrounds in resident engagement and sort of lifestyle programming. I think that's sort of important because there's that alignment between gamification and ultimately what it means to have residents effectively engaged and taking part in lifestyle programming. And so I think you nailed it with what gamification is. I think historically within senior living, we've gamified maybe in old school ways, but it's always been there, leveraging elements of competition, or even your example with sport. And I think ultimately, and I know with our upcoming slides, we'll dive into it a little bit deeper, but bottom line, I think the benefits to the residents are being able to achieve their goals. And we talk so much about that as an industry. And most recently, the last few years, with really kind of shifting that model to this more person-centric approach and really trying to hone in on what it is that our residents and our seniors are trying to get out of their retirement experience. So to the extent that gamification in a variety of settings can help them accomplish that goal and give them a way to track and measure if they're on their way to getting there, I think that's ultimately some of the bottom line benefits.
And I would add on to that, Tony, and I think a lot of times the word gamification kind of lends itself to think it's only for the physical side of well-being or, sports, fitness, things like that. But I think you can find gamification in a litany of uses. And so it's even applicable when we think about tracking different activities for brain health or emotional well-being, or following like diet, like you said, Ryan. And I also think there's a lot of opportunities to take the idea of gamification and even apply it for different needs for staff, who then in turn are turning around and providing that service, support, and care for the residents. And so I think you'll see it in a multitude of ways as we continue to move forward, as more people do embrace technology and are using things like iPads, tablets, smartphones, things like that. And there's all of these tools like apps that are on them that actually help support and drive gamification. But Tony and I are going to dive into a bit about how we've all been gamifying for years. We've just never quantified it as that.
Yeah, and just quickly to add to Kelly's point, I mean, she's spot on with, consider for audience your organization or your specific community and whatever semblance of a holistic lifestyle brand or program you might have. And so to Kelly's point on not being limited to just physical well-being, how might it touch some of these different aspects of health and wellness, and whether you have 3, 5, 7, 10 dimensions of wellness or none, and you're a little bit more holistic and you're driving it a different way, there's likely a way to gamify a variety of those aspects, again, all with giving residents insight into how they're doing with accomplishing some of those goals. So I think that's a great point, Kelly.
Yeah, no, I think that's excellent. I think gamification as a word gets kind of caught up with tech often, but it really isn't just a tech concept. It just kind of has been really embraced by that part of the market. It really applies in any setting, and it's not, the benefits are there whether you're a senior or whether you're younger. That's the exact same, and it works just as well. So Kelly kind of alluded to this, but why should you, or how do you think about why you should consider gamification beyond just the immediate benefits? What are some other benefits? And Kelly, you mentioned a bit around the data side of things. You want to maybe expand a bit on that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ryan. Well, I think for years, and Tony can attest to this as well, we've, in the engagement world, life enrichment activities, whatever word we're calling it today, historically, we've always kind of just tracked that participation, like who showed up. And that's not an application of gamification. What I really think gamification does is it helps to benchmark where people are starting with certain objectives or personal goals, and it helps you then track progress. So, Tony and I just both happen to have very similar exercise science backgrounds. So he and I kind of come at this organically just because of that knowledge base where you do assess things like, where are people starting? So whether it's the first time on, say, a new step, I went 5 minutes. You could be challenging somebody to say, great, that's awesome. Next time you come in, maybe you'll do 6 minutes. Okay, it could be something as simple as duration on a piece of exercise equipment, or how many sit to stands have you done? Or take that into, tracking participation another level or another layer. Okay, you're offering a brain health class for your residents. How often do they come? It's not about, are they there? It's what is the frequency? Because the frequency of attendance in a certain brain health program is going to correlate to learning, impact, progress. And so there are a lot of ways that you can apply gamification, but it's really designed to help measure where you're starting and what kind of progress are we making, if at all. Tony?
Yeah, I think that's right. And just to extend on that a little bit, I consider our audience, which I imagine are, again, life enrichment professionals, executive directors, maybe some corporate leadership where, you've maybe been curious about the effectiveness of your engagement program. How do we know we're moving the needle? And as Kelly mentioned, maybe we've tracked, participation, although that is sometimes easier said than done in maybe like a larger independent living environment, right? Where you have hundreds of residents and you have a lot of informal programming where they're just kind of leading their own events, their own programs and groups. And so you consider what we're curious about. And yes, attendance and participation, and beyond that, engagement, right? What did that experience look like for you? And beyond that, effectiveness, right? Did it actually make good on what it was hoping to do? And going back to what Kelly and I have been talking about, that individualized sort of rationale or motivation to do it, right? So the extent to which gamification can encourage you to go, encourage you to engage fully and effectively, and then give that individual resident information on, yes, this was beneficial or helpful or fun for you, that's great. And then Kelly mentioned benchmarking on the back end. That's huge too, to be able to look at some degree of numbers, some degree of data that gives you a sense of, yes, we are doing the right thing in terms of what we're programming and putting out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think, we've kind of given a very clear picture, what are the benefits, but now getting to kind of the more practicality of it, when you're thinking about implementing this, especially with seniors as a unique group, what are some of the best practices, maybe Tony and Kelly, you've seen in action in the field that have actually worked to get these programs off the ground?
Well, I think you brought up a good point earlier, Ryan, with just sort of how gamification transcends generations, right? It's not something that we have to, sometimes we put seniors or our residents into this sort of unique bubble where, we feel like it's this mystical, sort of hard, hard thing to crack. And it's not that different. You brought up your own personal example on what maybe motivates you to, use gamification. And so I don't think our seniors are that different. And so I don't think this has to be a sort of a category all on its own. And so I think one of the best practices, just to support gamification is just the weaving in and sort of the organic inclusion into already existing engagement programs and opportunities and sort of pathways for residents, right? And yes, some of it might be tech specific. So again, as our audience and organizations are listening here, I think consider how you've gotten residents on board, with certain types of technology platforms, whether it's an app or whether it's a piece of equipment, or maybe they already have their own sort of gamified experience through a personal wearable or something like that. So I think leveraging what you already know works and not feeling like you have to start over is a good way to weave in gamification and get some of your residents just to understand how, this is not a big deal and not incredibly different from a lot of what they're already doing.
I would agree. And I'm glad you said that, you're probably doing this already. You just don't quantify it as gamification. And I think something else to consider is always being able to communicate with your residents. What's the why? Why would we even take a gamification approach? Because I think a lot of times when you put that why out in front of them, they're more willing to accept, okay, we're going to use an app to do this, or we're going to track, our steps for a month, whatever it is that you do want to gamify to support them on their own personal well-being journeys. Just putting that out there really helps people decide if this is something that they want to embrace or not.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think, at the simplest level, there's not some magic or science to it. It's really just, you got to make it competitive and fun. And that's really it. You don't need prizes. Prizes are great, but not necessary. Tech's a tool. It can make it easier, but again, it's not necessary. It's really, the nuts and bolts. You're just trying to make things fun. And
where there is maybe Ryan and Kelly, like again, a new thing to learn or a new device or a new platform where that is sort of a thing. I think in our experience, as we've supported communities or have worked at communities, I think it's always nice to be able to glean on maybe a certain early adopting group of residents, right? That again are already gamifying in some way to kind of get on board and sort of demonstrate the fun and the effectiveness and sort of, what it is that they're getting out of it. I think that kind of small group of folks that maybe embrace this and sort of celebrating them, it does help as opposed to whether it's corporate staff or community staff or others really kind of pushing it, having residents influence residents, that's always effective.
No, I think that's an excellent point. And I guess one thing on that, and I think Tony, you've spoken about this in the past, is, when you're looking at one of these programs, how do you think about alignment and making, like when you're deciding what programming to do, how do you think about aligning with your own organization and goals?
In terms of the
trying to
best
think
practices,
just trying to think through what types of programming you're going to offer. Do you find it, is there a one size fits all, or is it more you want to align with your own community's goals and objectives?
Yeah, I think that goes back to, and Kelly alluded to it earlier, whatever your sense of, life enrichment brand, whatever you might have there, and whether you're, really strong on the physical fitness side, allowing it to be weaved in there. If you have, a strong brain health, brain fitness initiative, allowing it to weave in there. If you're really trying to promote maybe a more, social or vocational component, allowing it to sort of weave in there. So I do think it could take on whatever sense of community culture your resident engagement program or philosophy really kind of takes on, but then still allowing for that individualized sense as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree that the alignment is so important, and it's not going to be successful unless you have thought that through. All right, so we talked a good amount about this as well, and the benefits of gamification in terms of allowing you to collect data and measure effectiveness. One thing we do in our own programs, both for employees and then soon for residents, is we help you manage leaderboards or scoreboards for different competitions, which is a great way to measure that kind of engagement with the platform, and we can see the score is going up and how frequently people are engaging in the activities. So that's one way we do it, but there's a lot of ways beyond that to measure effectiveness. And so I'll turn it maybe to Kelly, you first, and hear from your experience, how you thought about measuring kind of how these programs have worked and done well.
It's funny, when we were doing our prep work leading this, it really kind of hit us in the face that really Tony and I have been applying gamification for years. We just, like I said earlier, we didn't call it that. We weren't like, oh, we're going to gamify this, but it does happen a lot in community life and with different engagement programs. And it can run the gamut from anything from, like I already just said on our last slide, about maybe you were doing a walking contest for a month and people are tracking steps. And you can be tracking steps in an app, or you can be tracking it on paper. A lot of you in the audience are probably familiar with the senior fitness test. And so we use that assessment to determine where residents are with things like strength and range of motion and flexibility and cardiovascular health. And it's not so much that assessment that's gamified, but then it's what are you doing in between? Whether it's 3 months or an annual reassessment with that, it's what are the applications in between? Your exercise classes, are they fun? Are you doing all sorts of fun and different physical fitness, contests and different things that keep people engaged and motivated to keep going, so that then when they reassess, they then get to see, has there been progress? Have I improved in those areas, or have I even maintained? Sometimes maintenance is just as valuable as progress or improvement. And so there's so many simple ways that we've been doing this over the years without technology. And now tech has come in, and, certain apps and different platforms are just further helping us to be able to automate tracking of people's different activities and performance. And like we said, it's not always specific to physical. That's just a really simple example for us to go to. Tony, what would you add on?
Yeah, I think you're right, Kelly. And I think this is such a great question to ask, because I think it kind of goes to the root of us just kind of kicking off the conversation, right? This is more of just like a general kind of overview, getting people to maybe think through this a little bit. And you maybe almost remove the word gamification from this and replace it with whatever else organizationally or at the community level you really want to measure the effectiveness of. And again, for the most part, that's likely your resident engagement, life enrichment program, or whatever it is, right? Again, I imagine that's the majority of our audience today. And so I think where you're gamifying under that umbrella of sort of resident engagement, I think you can pick and choose, whether it's one-off programs, like Kelly said earlier, it's a walking competition, one-off events that you might have, or if you're consistently gamifying with a specific aspect of your offerings, maybe it's virtual reality, or maybe it's a specific exercise program, that likely lends itself, to some measurement there. So I feel like that's part of it. I think in addition to that, where the program, platform, or piece of equipment, whatever it is that you're doing, where it has its own sort of kind of built-in gamification. Ideally, some of these solutions come with the ability to, aggregate and benchmark and run some numbers that can kind of give you that information. So it's multifaceted, but again, I feel like not thinking of it like as in its own vacuumed world, right? Like it's just going to be gamification. Here's how we're going to measure it. I think it's maybe a little bit of a carve out on how you might be measuring the effectiveness of other things, and it might not be limited to sort of again engagement. Maybe it's something that has to do with the dining experience, or something that has to do with another service component. Whether it's requesting transportation or housekeeping, or whether it's engaging with a loved one, right? I think about the use case of gamification in a care center environment, gamification to an assisted living resident, to a memory support resident and their family members, or even a skilled nursing resident. That's going to look and feel a little bit different than it will maybe for an independent living resident. So I think it just comes down to, again, what it is that they're hoping to achieve and kind of get out of that respective experience. And then again, if and when gamification was included, being able to carve that out a bit.
Absolutely.
Can I add one more thing, Rye?
Yeah.
It makes me, Tony's expansion on that also makes me think of, and I'm just organically calling out random partners in the space, but like AccuShield is, that's a system that tracks your visitors and guests, right? But then they've also, I don't know if they call it gamification, AccuShield team, don't kill me, but they've got the ability to see the number of visitors and guests that residents have, and it helps them do exception reporting, where you can then see, well, who's not having very many visits. So it's a similar use case, but for a different goal. And to Tony's point, it's all about what aligns with your organization, your community's objectives or KPIs. And so if you have a top priority of making sure people aren't isolated and are well connected in your community, AccuShield has a solution to help you. It's not necessarily, nobody's going to call it gamification. It's not a game. It's not uber fun. It's just they're using technology to be able to track something that matters to them.
Yeah, another example, and I know some of these slides sort of bleed into one another. But since we're talking about it, consider the rehab experience, right? And whether that's short-term outpatient, going to do it for a couple of weeks, or maybe something a little bit more extensive, like in a skilled environment. I imagine your therapy partners are gamifying in some way, shape, or form to help your residents achieve some sort of an outcome that's going to help them move on, get better, be able to transition back to another level of care and just recover from whatever it might be, right? And so, again, it's not incredibly novel or nuanced, but it's something that's used as a way to, help people accomplish something that they're looking for.
And Ryan, there's a question that I think maybe is directly related to this topic, Ron, and I'm just going to jump in with it. Somebody wrote in, what are your thoughts on using leaderboards and competitions to get people engaged and involved? And I think Tony and I both have use cases of this. I think I think they're applicable. And I think things like leaderboards, there's no age parameter around who those serve best. I mean, look at Peloton, you guys. They're successful because of leaderboards. But here's the thing, it's not for everybody. And so I think you have to give residents the choice and the autonomy to say, I want to be part of this on the leaderboard. Yeah, show my stuff, show my stats on whatever program we're doing. Or you might have some people say, I want to be a part of this, but I don't want anybody to see my information. And we have to respect that. And I'd be thrilled if somebody's like, I want to be a part of this program. I just don't want you putting my name and my whatever we're tracking up there. But I do think a lot of people are intrinsically driven for themselves to do better than they did the day before, or the week before. Or when they see somebody else that is their peer who's performing better than them, be shocked what people are suddenly able to do. And they're like, wait, Tony walked 18,000 steps yesterday. I can do more than Tony. Watch this. There is that drive to be like, I can do better than my peer. And so I do think there's a place, and I think it's a lot of how you frame it and how you explain it, and that you allow residents the ability to pop in and out of it, if you will. What would you say, Tony?
Yeah, I think you were pretty close to that number of steps. So thank you for that. First of all, I think that's right. And I think, again, what's sort of cool about that statement is it has nothing to do with age, though. Again, their willingness to be or not be a part of a certain leaderboard or be into a competitive event or sort of initiative. As you mentioned, that's probably more personality driven. But yeah, I mean, competition and leaderboards work. We see that in our space all the time. And so just picking and choosing how you sort of want to weave that in. And again, a lot of that goes back to what is that motivation for that resident? What is it that they're trying to kind of get out of their respective, retirement experience? And whether or not, again, a competitive program or event or series of things kind of lends itself to that. But in general, I think, yes, those are great ways, to get people rallying around something. And then whether it's a day, a week, a month, a year long, sort of competition, it is historically, it's been a very effective way. And if there's, again, a piece of equipment, a platform, something that allows you to track that and trend that over time, it could be a useful tool for that kind of greater objective that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. Like, competition's a tool and one effective approach, but there's many different ways. And a colleague of mine, and I can't remember if it's glass of water or steps, but she has an app, and it's really, I would call, self-competition. It has like a health bar on it, and as she does her steps, the bar goes up, and then as she doesn't, the bar goes down. And that graphic, that visually pleasing, satisfying graphic of having your bar or health score up high is, it's more competing with yourself, and that works just as well. It is doing.
Yeah. And that's a good point, Ryan. Like, again, consider your own individual usage of gamification and what percentage of all of what's available to you do you even end up using, right? Maybe you use half of the gamified components of your, of your tech ecosystem, or most of them, or all of them, or very few of them. Maybe you only care about a couple that are especially meaningful for you. And why is that, right? I could not care less about tracking my sleep. Some people are really into that for very specific reasons, right? So again, our residents aren't going to be much different with what motivates them to want to track and trend and take part in a gamified experience in the short term or long term.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a good segue. We talked, again, the slides bleed into each other a little bit. But I guess any additional points around how technology, and I can add some here too, obviously, given what we do, but from Tony and Kelly, any other for technology have you seen help in programming?
Well, Kelly, you've been merging, again, technology and engagement just for such a long time with just different areas of kind of senior living operations. I mean, do you feel like that user experience maybe sort of first and foremost, right? You talked about employee adoption early on. Do you feel like that's sort of a key component?
I do. I think it goes back to always explaining your why before you embark on something. And I think if you can explain, to your life enrichment professionals, here we have this new tech-based solution. Here are all of the applications. Here's how it's going to help you perform your job more efficiently or in a shorter amount of time. And I think it's important to note that the application of technology for gamification, and however you choose to apply it, what I like about it is it then gives back to staff extra time to be with the residents. I know that's especially what life enrichment professionals love, is that time with their residents. And so, you think back to when we'd write every resident's name down on paper and whatever we decided to track, to think that there can be an app in my smartphone, that we all have smartphones these days, and I could do that same task that may have taken me, I don't know, 20 minutes. I can now do it in 2 minutes. And I think it's important as an organization to decide, well, great, we just gave you back 18 minutes. Does that mean you use that 18 minutes for, a litany of other job related tasks? Or do you use that 18 minutes to interact and be face-to-face with your residents? And I think that's where life enrichment professionals are best served. And it's what they love the most about their roles. And so tech allows us to just capture information quicker, more accurately, Maybe there's some reporting and we don't have to track all of this stuff that we've done manually forever. What would you add, Tony?
Yeah, I think along those lines, it's just keeping that end user in mind. And again, for as long as we've seen sort of tech solutions come into our space, I think sometimes we're sort of curious about who did you think this was going to serve, right? Like who did you have in mind when you put it together? And it always, Kelly and I chuckle at some of these sometimes. It's like, well, did you know who the audience was? Like, did you understand whether it was the resident themselves or to Kelly's point, kind of that staff employee sort of team member? Because sometimes we'll get these solutions and it's kind of trying to make it fit and work within that environment, right? And maybe 70% of it applies, 60% of it applies, and so it's sometimes a little bit difficult as opposed to maybe knowing as much about your customer as possible. So to the sort of spirit of the question on how can technology support gamification, I think developers, vendors, providers, whomever is sort of thinking through some of these solutions, I would say just understanding your end user as much as possible and being able to understand what it is that they're hoping to achieve and accomplish. And Kelly's examples are great, on the employee side with efficiencies and being able to give some time back, and then just sort of applying that to other, sort of consumers, and whether that's the resident themselves, family members, again, even within the community, sort of the layers of leadership that we kind of see there as well. So I think to the extent that happens, it makes for a more seamless integration and sustainability as well. I think we see that a lot with technology in our space, where we get excited, we're all for it, let's test it out, let's try it, and then the months and the years sort of pass up, right, Kelly? Before you know it, it's been 2 years, 3 years, like, hey, didn't we do that before? Or didn't we try that once? What happened? And it's like, yeah, it just sort of fizzled out, right? So, I mean, wouldn't you say that sustainability is important also?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, I totally agree. That, yeah, hard to achieve, but I do fully agree that, yeah, that makes gamifying more approachable. I think tech does that very well. Data retention is a big part of it, and making that easy. And I think also just, you can think of some technology that's designed for this to be almost like a guidebook, and already has the steps built out for you and makes that implementation a lot easier. So adds that approachability for people who might not necessarily know where to start. This is one of the, I think, the most fun slides though, and one of the most practical. And that's, what are real world examples of effective gamification in senior living? And I think it's both things that are being done today that people might not realize, and then fun new innovative things that you might have all seen and are trying. Kelly, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. It's funny now reading this question. I didn't think about this when we were doing our, but when I still worked in a community here in Charlotte, it was inadvertently gamifying things. I just wouldn't have ever called it that in the moment. And so, I was tracking all sorts of data, especially around physical fitness. How many classes were residents attending? How many times were residents going into the fitness center? What pieces of they using? Like, yeah, I was tracking pretty much anything and everything under the sun, pen and paper, Excel spreadsheets. Where I think the gamification theory was applied, without me calling it that, was then we were using all of this data to then recognize and award residents for their engagement and commitment to their own fitness journey. And we would do an annual awards show. It was almost like the Oscars in our community. And we had all these categories, and for people to be awarded these, they were all based in what kind of data we were tracking based on their engagement, attendance, and performance. And it became this annual show, and people took it immensely seriously, which I appreciated. I mean, that was never our intent. It was supposed to be fun and recognize people's involvement in our community offerings. But they became very committed to it. And they would get like, oh, who's going to get most improved? And most improved was always based on our senior fitness test from one year to the next year. But it actually like spurred people to stay committed to their fitness journeys. And we were tracking all sorts of things. Like we would do like, I forget what we called it, like best all around. And that was the person who went to the most things over the course of a year. And when I reflect back on the residents who received that every year, they were highly engaged, super social, connected with everybody, physically fit, like emotionally well. And so when I start to think back on this question, I'm like, oh my gosh, we really doing this. I just never would have called it that. And when I think about, man, if I'd had some sort of app or platform to house all of this and take me out of this archaic methods that I use that was immensely time consuming, it would have made it that much more efficient and probably more enjoyable from my lens, because I was like, oh my God, I got to track all this. So, there's such amazing, awesome, cool applications of this. Tony, what's something that you love from your V settings or even some of your other work with other operators over the years?
Yeah, what I think is super cool about your story, Kelly, is in particular how, again, like your holistically well residents that you kind of mentioned, right, really thrived in that environment. And I think fast forward to some of the things we see present day now, I think a lot of these sort of solutions that are kind of merging and effectively meshing holistic well-being. I think those are some of my favorite sort of gamification experiences and sort of examples. And so whether it's working on your balance, but then also, doing a little bit of a brain fitness exercise, or, you're in some way, competing against the screen or against some sort of an avatar. I think there's some good providers in our space that are, again, from a fitness perspective, from a brain health perspective, kind of merging some of those things and coming up with some cool pieces there. So I think that's one example. And I think the other, and we kind of been alluding to it during our time today, is when I see that data being aggregated, when I see platforms that are able to, not only take in that information, give residents some feedback, on how it is that they're doing, but then they're able to, then have that carry over to an administrative platform or a backend that people are able to run reports on, get some information on. I feel like that, is something that is effective as well. I think it's just as important along those lines to also talk a little bit about maybe some not so effective examples of gamification. I think our audience would appreciate that. And I think some of that goes back to what we were talking about earlier with just knowing your audience, knowing your customer. Again, while we have some cool examples on what works well, sometimes I see efforts to gamify in ways that maybe aren't the most meaningful, right? So it's for the purposes of maybe just using the platform more, or something that isn't just relevant, to that resident. And I say that just because, I mean, not to sort of, knock on anybody, but when you think about, you get one shot to maybe roll this out, right? We see that with technology sometimes. And if it doesn't go well, you're going to be hard pressed to try to kind of do it again. And so if residents in some fashion get turned off because you really wanted them to, track the amount of times you made a friend, or, please make a reservation for this, like you'll get some points for it, and that they just don't care about that for whatever reason, then they're just going to be turned off to the entire platform, and you might lose on some really cool features and functions. So I think, there are some kind of words of caution, not only with great examples of gamification, but maybe some not so great ones as well.
Well, I think that goes back, Tony, to make sure that communication is in front of people of the why, so that if you do have this awesome app or platform, people aren't just going in and being like, what? I get points if I sign up for all of these offerings? Sign up. And they're just signing up because they're like, ooh, I'm going to get points. And it's like, whoa, time out. Do you even know what the points are for? Are you interested in what happens when you get a certain amount of points? And so again, it's so important to make sure you're in front of the messaging of, and whether it's for your residents or your staff, of why are we going to use this tool to support how we want to roll out XYZ programs.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. It's not only alignment with the community's goals, but with the person's goals themselves. And this is in furtherance and support of that. It's not to, condition a behavior that is not ultimately beneficial to the senior themselves. This is really a tactic and tool to further their own well-being goals, for example, but not something to use in the wrong context. That's one way to put it, I guess. So we gave some examples. Now, I think this is what everyone's probably asking is, okay, you get off this webinar and you're all excited about gamification, and then you're like, okay, where do I start? And so I guess, first off, before we even dive into that, are you ready? How do you know you're ready for gamification? And what kind of questions should you ask yourself before you kind of embark on this new approach?
Well, I think a big point of what we've mentioned today is just how for as long as we've been doing this, we've been gamifying. So I can't imagine anyone not being ready for gamification. Again, if there's any takeaway from this, it's not, something, while there might be some new technologies out there that are helping to support it, the idea of motivating and incentivizing residents to take part in something and care about what the outcome of that may or may not be, that's not brand new. So I can't imagine anybody not necessarily being ready for that. And I think as an industry, at least from again, resident engagement, lifestyles, activities, whatever we want to call it, we've been really good about strategizing along those lines, right? It's that subspace within our larger space has come a really, really long way. And we've been able to sort of cultivate these strategies around resident engagement. And most recently, maybe over the last 5 or 10 years, we've weaved in tech as a subset of that, right? So as part of that larger resident engagement strategy, how are we including technology? I think we've gotten really good at that as well. So now you sort of sprinkle in this gamification component also, and I think that's how it needs to happen. It needs to be another kind of subset of some of these larger strategic things that we're thinking about. So I think for our audience is, within your, and the time is great. I mean, we're just starting Q4. A lot of people are thinking strategically what they might do, next year. Budgets are happening as well. And so the time is really, really good right now, I think, to really think about what does your resident engagement strategy look like for next year? And how might you weave technology into that? And as a subset of that, how might gamification, fit into that as well? So I think it's something to keep in mind. And Ryan, what I like about what you said before handing it off was the fact that it's a tool, right? How can that be leveraged from that tool perspective to help us move the needle on some of what we're hoping to accomplish? What do you think from your perspective, Kelly?
Well, before my loving Wi-Fi said, I'm going to shut off for 30 seconds. My apologies to you all. I also think something to consider as you move forward, we are an industry steeped in assessing and measuring, right? Tony, you can attest that. Ryan, I know you're being exposed to that left and right. And I almost think this idea of gamification embraces that, but it gives it that layer of something that is fun, but not only fun, is also compelling. And I think that's important. Think about, to Tony's point, who's that end consumer? If it's your resident and you're like, hey, we're going to assess how you're doing, that doesn't always have the best connotation. So when we think about, hey, we're going to gamify, this program for the next 6 months, it kind of gives it a different, we're just changing semantics, but I think the way people receive that can make a difference. And so Tony's right. This is a prime time to be strategizing for 2024. And how can you apply this theory of gamification? And I think I would also just take a step back and say, one, where are we already doing this? And two, how could we apply this moving forward that would help us maybe get some residents involved in different ways, and not just, hey, they're here, like what aligns for them, which that's kind of been an underlying theme here today. What aligns for them as individuals and what aligns for them as a community as a whole.
That gamification inventory suggestion is a really great one, Kelly. Like, how are you doing it today? what's working and not working with how you might be gamifying. Is it, more tech forward? Is it a little old school? And how might you learn from what you're already doing? I think that's a great starting point.
Yeah, that's and it's kind of where I started with this. I think that is the one of the biggest takeaways of the day is that you are already gamifying. So just embrace where it's already happening, and just being cognizant of it being an actual approach can help you refine and improve. But start where you're already doing it. This is not a scary word. It's something that's happening, and you know our ultimate aim today really was, yes, there's tech and all this stuff you can do to make it more effective, but it's one step at a time, and start small. And so I'm going to give, before we open it to questions, kind of a last word or takeaway to each of Tony and Kelly. I mean, I think my main one would just be, and not to hit the nail on the head a million times, define your objectives up front and know your audience. I think those are two of the biggest things you can do before you kind of start trying to tweak your programming and incorporating these elements. Kelly, how about you?
I think, and we have repeated this, that there's a good chance you're already doing this in some form or fashion, and to not shy away or fear this idea or concept of gamification. I guarantee everybody in our audience has done this at some point, working in a community or supporting a community. And so just lean into that differently and know that you have done this. So then to maybe apply tech forward, application of it, you're already there. And it's just a matter of feeling comfortable enough to embrace and adopt technology to help you be able to do it more effectively, more efficiently. Tony?
Yeah, I think for as long as we've been having more formality and structure and even value, I guess, behind our world of resident engagement, there isn't anybody I've met in our space, colleagues and leaders and folks that haven't wanted to really prove the worth and value of how they engage residents. That's always been something that we've been aiming to do and have gotten incredibly good at it, over time. And there's still such huge opportunity to do that. And so I think gamification is a way to help further kind of move that needle. And so I think that would just be something to close on is it's something that should be embraced. I think if for at least one reason, for that reason, just in and of itself.
Awesome. Well, before I turn it over to the questions, I just want to thank Tony and Kelly for joining me. This is such a fun topic, and had a blast talking about it with you today, and hope to talk more about it soon. And then Colin, thanks again for letting us speak to your audience and having us today.
Well, Ryan, thank you very much. And thank you very much, Tony and Kelly. Always insightful. The two things that I took away from this session was basically, we need to stop being afraid of new things. And what's new is always old. As everyone alluded to, that we've been doing this, the number one thing that drives participation, as an example, amongst physical activity, if you look at some of the research, is one word: fun. And I think that we all try to make our programs, or should be trying to make our programs, fun. And gamification certainly can help with that. With that in mind, there's a question here, and I'm not sure who would like to take it. So, feel free to dive in. And that is, when you're talking about making things fun, what are your thoughts in using leaderboards in competition to get people engaged and involved?
Oh, Colin, we answered that.
No, you didn't.
It was such perfect timing when we were talking about effectiveness. I just threw you under the bus, didn't I, sir?
I was just having so much fun doing other stuff that I didn't hear it. But let me ask you then a question. That is, a lot of this stuff is also happening outside of senior living, day in, day out. We talk about assessments, number one. That's happening. Any fitness or health club you go into, you can get all your assessments. But it's by choice. you're going in and you're saying, yeah, hey, I want to come in and I want to check this out. And everything is always by choice. But I think in the senior living industry, we're almost trying to make it not mandated, but part of, the experience instead of by choice. Maybe I'll ask you that question, Ryan, and that is, how do we move past that to embracing this as a positive choice and a positive experience to enable us to be inspired to move forward?
I think it all honestly comes down to that buy-in, and I think this is what we're doing today is a great starting point for helping people understand that this is not a scary thing and it is beneficial. It'll make your job more fun and it'll make it more effective. And I think examples, practical examples, software that can make that process easier and make it more approachable is a great starting point. But really, it's that education. I think that's where things start initially.
And by the way, people asked if this session was going to be available. Yes, email will go out to everyone with a link so that they will be able to have access to it. And then it will also be housed on the ICA website. And I believe it will possibly be housed on the ICON website or not. Not to throw you under the bus there, Ryan, but the simple thing is, yes, you'll be able to access it no matter where you are. And I'll ask you, one question as we wrap up here, and I want to, thank everyone for attending this session. And what will people be able to experience at the ICAA conference and expo from ICON that might be new as sponsoring this session? It would be appropriate for individuals to also experience you at the actual conference itself. Anything new, interesting, exciting that they can learn about there?
Absolutely, and yeah, thanks for calling that out. We'll be at booth 512, so please stop by. The two things I think hopefully we'll be able to talk about more then are, one is our smart aging initiative, and so we've implemented AI, which I guess is another scary word, but in the end it's quite simple, and it's leveraging machine learning to basically allow us and life enrichment program directors to optimize their programming for the unique population within their community at a given point in time. And so we use the technology to look at the interests of the resident population, of what they have attended in the past, what they said they liked, to basically tell you if your program is going to be applicable to those in your population at that point in time. Maybe less interesting and to your audience, although it might be, and it touches on what we talked about today, is we have an employee engagement gamification application that we are launching brand new and will be out next month. So we'll be happy to share more on that as well.
Well, we are thrilled to have you there, and thrilled to have you involved in today's conversation, Ryan. And Kelly, as always, it's a pleasure to have you share your expertise. And Tony, it's always a good thing to see you and hear you. And with that said, I want to thank all of you for taking the time to attend this session. As I mentioned, an email will go out with the link. And if you have any questions, feel free to email us and we will make sure to pass it on. Until then, have a fantastic day. Bye now.
Thank you.
All right. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, my Wi-Fi cut out. I was like, do not, it cuts out once a day on me. And I was like, please don't cut out during this webinar.
Don't have the speed of time. So
I'll see you guys.
All right, guys. Good to see you. Take care.
Thank you so much. Bye.